Imagine this. The future head of the most powerful bank in the world makes a public, shocking apology for the single greatest economic disaster of the 20th century. Why? Well, the answer takes us deep into the story of an idea that completely took over the world, changed how every government thinks about the money in your pocket, and then just seemed to disappear. This is the story of monetarism.
Yep, you heard that right. This is what Ben Bernanke, who was a governor at the U.S. Federal Reserve at the time, actually said to the economist Milton Friedman. An apology for the Great Depression. An event that happened 70 years before he said it. I mean, think about that.
So what's going on here? Why on earth would he do that? An admission of guilt on that scale is unheard of. Well, the answer lies in the incredible, world-changing influence of one theory, pioneered by Friedman himself. A theory called monetarism.
To get this, we gotta go back in time. Picture it. It's the late 1960s, early 1970s, and the global economy is, well, it's a total mess. Policymakers were staring down a monster they had just never seen before, a puzzle that the economic theories of the day just had no answer for.
You see, for decades, economists had this nifty little tool they loved called the Phillips Curve. The idea was actually pretty simple. It said a government had to pick its poison. If you wanted low unemployment, you had to live with higher inflation. If you wanted to stamp out inflation, you had to accept higher unemployment. It was a straightforward trade-off.
But then the 1970s hit, and that simple choice just shattered. Economies weren't getting one or the other. They were getting the worst of both worlds. Prices were skyrocketing, and millions of people were losing their jobs. This toxic brew got a new name, stagflation, and it completely broke the old economic rulebook.
So with the old playbook totally useless, the door was wide open for a new idea. And that's when this guy, Milton Friedman, and his colleagues from the Chicago School of Economics walked in. They stepped right into the chaos with an explanation that was radically simple and, to a lot of people, pretty revolutionary. This single sentence was the heart of it all. Friedman basically said, forget all the complex stuff you think you know. Inflation is simple. It's caused by one thing and one thing only: too much money chasing too few goods. And who was responsible for the money? The government, specifically the central bank. Okay, so the engine under the hood of monetarism is this thing called the quantity theory of money. Now, don't let the equation scare you. The idea is really intuitive. M is all the money floating around. Q is all the actual stuff we produce, the goods and services. For the equation to balance, if you pump a bunch of new M into the system, but Q, the amount of stuff, doesn't grow, then P, the price level, has to go up. That's inflation. Now, they made one really big assumption here, which we will definitely come back to, but that core idea was powerful. But here's where it gets really interesting. Monetarism didn't just offer an explanation for inflation. It took that old, trusted Phillips curve, and it completely tore it apart. So they introduced this game-changing concept called the natural rate of unemployment. Friedman argued that, look, in any dynamic economy, there's always going to be some unemployment. People are between jobs, they're looking for better opportunities, some skills become obsolete. That's just life. He said this baseline level was unavoidable, and trying to use government policy to force that number lower wasn't just pointless, it was actually really damaging. And here's the trap he described. Let's say the government prints a bunch of money, creates a surprise burst of inflation. For a little while, it seems to work. Workers look at their paychecks, they see bigger numbers, and they think, hey, I got a raise. So they're happier to work. Firms see their costs in real terms go down, so they hire more people. Unemployment actually dips. It looks like a win, right? But it's all an illusion. Because, of course, that feeling doesn't last. Pretty soon, everyone goes to the grocery store and realizes, wait a minute, prices are up too. My bigger paycheck doesn't actually buy me anything more. So they demand higher wages to catch up. Firms then have to cut back, and just like that, unemployment snaps right back to its natural rate. The only thing you're left with is the higher inflation you created. The trade-off is completely gone. Now, you might be thinking, this is all just, professors arguing in ivory towers. But nope. These ideas were about to get very, very real, and they would lead to one of the most dramatic policy shifts of the entire century. And this chart just lays out the battle of ideas perfectly. You have the Keynesian approach: unemployment is high, the government should spend more. Inflation is a problem, raise taxes. Then you have the monetarist approach: unemployment, just accept the natural rate. Inflation, there's only one tool you need: control the money supply.
It was a massive shift from government as this active fine-tuner to government as a simple rule setter who then just gets out of the way. And then it happened, October 1979. Inflation in the U.S. was absolutely out of control. The new head of the Federal Reserve, a guy named Paul Volcker, basically stood up and said, "All right, that's it. We're trying something new." He announced that the Fed was officially adopting the monetarist playbook. Monetarism was now in the driver's seat of the U.S. economy. And you know what? The experiment worked. In a way, Volcker's policies did crush inflation, but the victory came at a huge cost, and the formal doctrine of monetarism itself began to fizzle out. But its core ideas had already changed economics forever. So what went wrong? Well, remember that one big assumption we talked about? This was its Achilles heel. The whole theory rested on the idea that the velocity of money, basically how fast a dollar gets spent and respent, was stable and predictable. But then came the 1980s. You get financial deregulation, ATMs, new kinds of bank accounts, and all of a sudden, velocity goes completely haywire. And if you can't predict how fast money is flying around the system, then controlling the amount of money doesn't really work anymore. The main lever they thought they had, it broke. But even though central banks gave up on that specific tactic, the ghost of monetarism is everywhere. Its legacy is immense. The core belief that a central bank's #1 job is keeping inflation low, that's pure monetarism. The deep skepticism about government fine-tuning the economy, monetarism. And maybe the biggest one of all, the idea that our expectations of inflation can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, that's now central to all economic policymaking. And it's another key insight from Friedman. So monetarism as a brand name might be gone, but its DNA is just baked into modern economics. Which brings us right back to that wild apology. The ideas were so powerful, they forced the most important financial institution on Earth to completely rethink its own history. So the real question is, even if we don't call it monetarism anymore, are we all still living in the world that Milton Friedman built?